guys, welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to be discussing some debating whether economic development is good for our cities or bad for our cities or maybe indifferent in that area. If you haven't been here yet, make sure you hit subscribe and click on the bell. If you're back, thank you again for coming back. Make sure you put a comment below so we know that you're watching and we can interact with you. And maybe if you have a topic you'd like to see us discuss, we can do that too. So anyways.
And I think, we want your comments because we really want you to be part of the discussion. We'd love it if you were here. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to discuss too, as we talk about this whole idea of development, planned development, accidental development, is also just the whole idea of gentrification. Is that something that should be combated? Is that something, it's obviously a lot of people think it's a bad thing when it happens. And yet homeowners, property owners, a lot of business owners like it. Yeah. So we can kind of talk about some of the pros and cons of that. I mean, it's a touchy subject in a way. We're going to try to treat it fairly like we do everything, but we also don't want to,
you could define,
and we don't want to hide from these topics. We want to kind of get into
I don't
them.
want to be ignorant.
Right.
So, but for the people
let's
who
define
don't
some
know,
terms.
just define
Okay, gentrification is, you'll have an area that, maybe historically was part of a downtown, for example, and it kind of got a little run down, maybe as businesses closed. A lot of times that happened maybe in the 1970s, 1980s. And then you'll have a movement, younger people moving in, professionals moving into an area, people that have good paying jobs. You'll even get companies sometimes because the real estate is cheap to either buy or buildings cheap to lease. They'll come in,
the whole place.
They'll either bulldoze or they'll fix it up. A lot of times they fix it up nice, and it becomes
they price everybody out.
Right. Well, what happens is then you get all the fancy coffee shops, the fancy restaurants, the boutique stores. Next thing you know, the little house little housing,
the generational housing it was my great grandparents, my grandparents, my parents, and now it's mine. They have to move.
Or even people that work in that town that,
they can't afford to live there anymore.
And I'm using these terms relatively, you can have affordable housing, quote unquote, and now all of a sudden the housing's through the roof.
There was a movie about this. There was a movie. It's called Up. You remember?
Yeah.
Remember he held out, and then he says it wasn't necessarily about him staying in that community. So he put balloons on his house and he took his house with him. So like if that, he could just said, hey, why didn't he tell those contractors building all the skyscrapers, hey man, if you move my house, I'll move wherever you want. But no, he put balloons on and took off. And then that's the whole thing. I just think of him going, there were solutions to this. If you're in real estate, you watched Up and like, hey, there's solutions to this.
Well, I think too,
that's exactly what you're saying is
there's two things that I'm saying in that context. Number
that
one,
movie's like about that.
People have and I think this is to your point, people have a nostalgia or an emotional connection to places. It's maybe where they raised their kids or where their grandparents lived or whatnot. And a lot of people feel very grounded personally when they are in the area that they know best.
Right.
The other aspect, though, is the economic aspect. People, they need to work. They don't want to commute far. It's one thing to say, oh, well, the rising tide is going to raise all boats. You're going to get a better job. But a lot of people can't get that better job. Maybe they don't have that education. They're not going to go get the job as a doctor or an attorney or an accountant or an engineer. They're going to still be doing work in retail, for example. And now they're going to have to move further and further away, which adds to commute costs.
I would say I don't. And
now that I think about it, there is a long list of movies about this topic where everyone gets like, we're coming in, we're taking this, and you're going to have to move, or you're not going to move. We're not giving you money. You're going to be, and you're going to take over. Flip side of that, you can live in a neighborhood, and it go down the tubes. And it said, are you in a better spot? Because now, I'm not paying expensive taxes, but the jobs still kind of move away. Well, but it kind of rarely happens. But it used to be a decent neighborhood. Now it's not.
Well,
it was Back to the Future, right?
Okay.
When he came back and he's like,
well, you see it in Texas in this way too. You'll drive through some of the smaller towns in Central Texas, and you'll see even East Texas, some of them. They're very, very small towns. But you can see that they used to have a movie theater.
Yeah.
They used to have kind of
Yeah.
like the facades of some of the buildings
Ghost
are kind of
towns.
nice.
Ghost towns.
They're not even really ghost
Yeah,
towns
we
yet.
call them ghost towns though. If
Oh,
they
really?
if they're going down, like if the spiral is down, it's not growth,
It's a
down.
zombie town.
They call it they call it
Because
ghost
there's still
town.
people walking
There is
around.
there's one in West Texas right before you cross over to New Mexico. There's a town there. Nobody lives in it. The town's still there. There's nobody there.
Yeah.
And but it started as something. Route 66. There's ghost towns all along the historic Route 66. Right? And there was another movie about that. Disney does all these movies. Disney does all the movies. Cars. The movie Cars. That was like the same thing.
Interestingly, Cars is filmed by Pixar. Pixar's headquarters is in Emeryville. When I was a kid, I lived not far from Emeryville. And Emeryville was, I remember train tracks and warehouses.
Yeah.
I won't say that was necessarily much of a gentrification. I don't know what housing really existed. There was some, obviously. But now, good luck being able to afford living in Emeryville, parts
like
of Oakland,
Detroit, the same
Alameda.
way?
Detroit
They had
really
a bad
suffered. There, I
time.
think
The
in
mortgage
that
crisis
case,
really hurt them,
like-
and the car crash.
yeah,
car
that's
crash.
really the
Car crash.
70s.
Like you know what I'm saying.
I think it was the 70s and the 80s that really hurt them the most. But and 90s was flat, 2000s. But you see a revitalization in cities like Detroit. There are areas that are nice.
they bulldoze houses a
but
lot.
you can even see this though.
The cities did that. They came in there bulldoze. They were turned into crack houses, and like different houses. They were like squatters.
Right.
drugs.
But I think you're going to have that always in certain areas. You're going to have that type of revitalization or destruction.
It's good
But
opportunities
we're talking
for
about-
real estate investors
but
to
I-
go in there and make things. Those opportunities for people to make money. But the problem is like I'm not trying to get off the subject, but we're talking about like the town I lived in was a small town, a suburb of Dallas, right? And so the city grew to us. I moved there because I didn't want to be in the city, and now I have to move again. Right? Like, I don't mind the commute. I didn't mind the commute then because I still worked in the city. I just didn't want to live there. Now I have to move because now there's too many people. That's the way this town we're in here at Roses was like.
Well, I would say, like you gave some examples that to me were on the micro scale of like parts of cities or certain areas. But I think if we even think of like areas fully, maybe like you're saying here, Flower Mound, Highland Village, Louisville, on the grand scale, you still end up with gentrification. But really, let's get back to the other point of planned development. When you don't have planned development, when it's very organic, quote unquote, grown, it kind of gets herky jerky at times.
Yeah.
The problem is
It does.
then you do end up with housing that's less expensive, but then there's no school or hospitals, or there's not the fire departments nearby. That can create its own issues. So a well-planned community needs to take into account the citizens and the needs of the citizens and the wants of the citizens. I do think that a healthy local economy is, and a healthy geography is going to make life livable and safe and enjoyable and beautiful, aesthetically beautiful, regardless of your socioeconomic level. And not only that, but provide opportunity for movement between those levels.
So if it's planned, if it's not planned, like the city I live in, it's a bit messy. It's like we don't know what's going on here.
Right.
The school's okay, but they combine with other districts, whatever. But like here in the Highland Village area, when they grew here, they added trails, ponds, fishing, different things, and they said if we add this, we have to add this to match. If you add this, you have to do this, and so these things build together.
Or you'll have shopping areas, and you'll have enough parking. Because that's another thing. You can have just a bunch of stores go up, not enough parking. That jams things up. So, I'm all for planning. Like, I think planning is important.
Yeah.
I think what happens is also, I think gentrification can happen when there's some short-term opportunity, but it's not fit into the context of the long-term health of the community.
Yeah. There was now I'm thinking of all the things that come to my mind. Now there's a song with Talking Heads wrote a song about like this used to be a Pizza Hut. Now it's a field of flowers, right? And then so like, hey, it's just about going back to kind of the basics. But like, think about when we grew up, where I grew up, and like you look and you're like, across the street from me was this huge field. Now, as a kid, we played in that field, but like, I don't think any adult thought to themselves, that will always be a field. Like, what are you gonna do in a
Well,
field?
most people don't think anything about any of it.
So like, you can't build that there. Why? What did you think was gonna happen?
Right.
Like, it was going to be something eventually. Might as well capitalize on it. So, but I think when you go out west of Texas, and I know we're keeping this kind of Texas, I don't know California markets and different things, but you always see development somewhere in the cities. I was told years ago that people tend to migrate northwest unless there's a barrier that they cannot, like I don't know, a country line, a lake, a river, or whatever, and then it will go along that. So I don't know if there's truth to that.
Or maybe
Maybe there's
just
a psychology to it.
maybe to the coasts,
Yeah,
or where there's food and
Yeah.
safety. I would say that California is a poster child for the issues that happen when you end up with a large population, an affluent population, but an affluent
Quickly.
population for people that are in certain sectors, professionals. But there's a lot of people in California that really struggle, and housing is insanely expensive.
I don't know how they do it. I just don't know. I've always thought to myself, even 20 years ago, I thought to myself, oh, cost of living there is high. So why wouldn't you? And I used to work by the airport over here, the private one, and guys would fly in. They would live here on the weekends, but work in California. It's cheaper. It was cheaper literally to fly to work here than it was, and to live here, right, and fly here than it was to live there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they would prefer. And I was like, every week you just basically lived here on the weekends. I don't know. To me, that's a bit of a commute, right? That's like what was it, 2.5 hours to fly?
I think 3 hours.
Right, and that's if you don't get stuck.
That's not including delays or getting
Well,
to and
and
from the airport.
I'm kind of guessing that now that line on housing is slightly blurred a little bit. It's like, I'm not saying that you're going to get the best house for the money, same here, but I mean, think about it now. Like the house that I'm in, I didn't pay near what it's worth now. And I was like, what could you get for $500,000 here versus $500,000 there?
Well, I've lived here for 3.5 years, and when I say here, I mean in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And when I moved here in the spring of 2020, you could buy a home. There were many, many homes that were livable, nice, safe
200
areas.
to 300,000.
Under 300,000, like
Not
250
anymore.
to 300. Now it's nearly impossible. I would say
You have to go way,
homes
way
have
out.
increased 50 to 100,000 at least in equity, and I'm talking
Yeah.
not for $1 million homes. That's maybe more, maybe less. I don't know.
Yeah.
But your 250 home is now 350.
So what do you
Your
do?
350 is now 450.
You have to go 45 minutes out in any direction to get something that would be affordable or in a
And then gas is higher.
manufactured
So then
home.
you're paying for gas.
Well, okay, so on my Facebook gave me a reminder post. It gives you those, like, hey, this is what you posted 11 years ago, right? I had one, it was 8 years ago. It was yesterday. 8 years ago yesterday, I had posted a picture of a gas station that I was stuck at, and the gas was $3.50 8 years ago. I didn't make this money I make now 8 years ago, so I'm like, technically, gas is cheap now. By inflation went up, but gas went down.
Yeah, it's okay.
And I'm like, hey, I want to argue about gas prices just like anybody else, but I was like, hey, my post showed $3.50 for gas, and I didn't pay $3.50 this week. I paid like $2.89 or something. I don't know. And you go to Buc-ee's and get it cheaper or something. That's
Yeah, a few cents.
but the gas prices always do this, depending on what's going on. I mean, there's with the Ukraine thing and the war, and it's.
Right.
I don't know whose opinion is on like, oh, it's about oil or whatever, but usually there's a motive somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's never been just about like, hey, someone disrespected me. Let's spend billions of dollars on war. There's a benefit. There's spoils of war.
Right. For somebody, unfortunately.
For somebody, there's years.
Right.
Think about years and years and years. I mean, you look back in the Bible, and like people have been fighting for something, and there's always been spoils of war. There's got to be motivations. I'm under the opinion.
Okay. To that point, you're talking about motivations. Who's making money? So let's get back to the topic as far as when it comes to
economic development
or not.
Yeah.
Is your city planning who is
Yes.
benefiting from that? Are you more pro, and I hate to even say pro business, because to me, that doesn't do justice to the fact that one set of business is sole proprietorships, mom and pop, boutiques, individuals
Buy local.
that are trying to create a local economy.
Yeah.
Then there's the others that are big corporate
Walmart.
companies coming in. Well, that's retail, and there's also companies that come in that have a headquarters, a corporate headquarters, and that does create well-paying jobs, good-paying jobs. That's amazing, but it also can add thousands of individuals that make good money that are going to be bidding on those homes and causing those home prices to go up.
They come out, the home prices go up, and then next thing you know, if I buy a house for $100,000, but I'm being taxed at $500,000, I have to move because I'm being priced out of my home purely on taxes. It happened to my parents. They couldn't afford the taxes anymore. They had to move. They had to sell their house and move way away, like far away, over an hour.
What I'm interested in your opinion on is, do you think, like, in what ways is planned economic development versus, we'll call it organic or haphazard development? I don't want to bias you with my language, but
I feel like
which is better? And then secondly, if it's planned urban development or planned city development, how should that be done in such a way to affect the best outcome?
Okay, so this is a layered answer. This is why I believe that local voting is the most important, because you're putting council members and then they're choosing, or you got local people volunteering for economic development or planning and zoning and different things like that. I think that planned economic development is key. Having a city plan, to me, is like makes the most sense, because then you know that there's a cohesive plan as a city. Then you can vote into like this yes, this no, this yes, like warehouses over here, homes over here, retail over here. It's organized, and that kind of makes life happy when we're organized,
I agree.
right?
I agree.
But when there's no plan, there's two things that I think happen. Someone is involved that shouldn't be, by two things: money, so there's corruptness in it, or just completely inexperienced and doesn't know. So we voted in officials that are corrupt because their motivation is how much money can I make by being in a position of power, or the one that says I got voted in because I was popular, but I'm not really good at the job. It doesn't mean like I've been given positions like, look, that's not my lane, right? And I said, not that I'm a bad person or bad at the things I do. It's just that's just not what I do. No one's going to ask me to cook dinner. It's not going to be good. Just because I can cook one thing well doesn't mean that I can cook. I'm not a cook. So don't ask me to do that, because it's not going to turn out well. I don't pick colors. I'm your typical, like, I just show up and do. So that would be like putting the wrong people in place causes that chaos, right? So maybe when the city moves to you, as long as the city moves to you and the people are in play, that can keep that organization. It may not feel such like a city anymore. Maybe feel like, oh, I'm happy here, and there's that happiness to life. There's some towns around here. Northlake has done a really good job, right? Have you been to Northlake? Like it's very organized. They have this here, they have this here, and they're doing a really good job of getting the schools built and different things like that. And it's like the freshest one that I know of. So that would be my opinion. Is I like the organization of it, because it may not feel so chaotic, like frustrating. When you go out to let's say Chico, Texas, people are moving there. People are moving to like a Chico, Texas of like less than 1,000 people. They don't want development there. You know what I'm saying? They have a what is it? They have a plant there. It's a rock quarry. I think that's what they do. That's their industry. That's what they plan on doing. They're not going to build it out. That's when you move to Chico, is to get away, right? So, but if I'm moving from here, just talking about geographically, if you're in a suburb and you decide I'm going to move to the next place, and you just like because get away from people. If I move to Sherman, Texas, or if I move to Gainesville, I can expect the city to be with me within the next 10 to 15 years.
Right.
So I should think about my next move before I do it. And I would say this: a good qualified real estate agent will explain that to you.
It may be too that
So
you want to do that because you're going to
Values.
buy property that's going to increase.
If
in
you're
value.
investing, and thinking like, hey, I'm not really sold, I'm not emotionally attached, like you said. I'm emotionally attached to maybe the house or maybe where it's at or different things like that. You don't want to leave that, so you're just like, hey, I'm not emotionally attached. But some people do get emotionally attached. You've been into it, like, I just hate leaving and been here all my life. Those types of things. I'm like, I'm ready to move. Like any day, I'm like, yeah, let's move. My wife, not the same.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a perfect answer for
No.
any of this. I think that you kind of do a little of this, and then you see where you're going, and then you make adjustments on
Haven't
the
you
fly.
seen it? I know this happens in California. If they make tons of Disney movies and different, there was another one. Was it Short Circuit? It was a movie about little UFO aliens. That I have to put it.
I don't know my children's movies very well.
It was an '80s movie. Where
Short Circuit was the little robot.
was that the Johnny Five?
I
That
don't remember.
Anyways, doesn't matter. There's Hollywood makes tons of movies about this. That being said, I know that you have got to, as a kid, went around California and you see the houses go up and there's that one house that stood out and it's like they just held out to the end. I am not moving, right? Or this one road went like this and did this and did this and did this and went that way.
For
And
sure.
why? Because that person wouldn't sell. And we're like, hey, we're coming this way. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
You can either be with it or you're going to be left behind.
Yeah.
So you got to pick. If you're stuck in the development, you have to choose, yes, I'm going to be part of I'm going to benefit financially. And then you have to get qualified people to help you with that decision, but I don't think you can't just hold out. I think anyone in the history, if you look at it, anyone that just held out never won really.
No, they do win. And when they hold out long enough, a lot of times they get
Timing.
offered even more.
Timing's perfect on that. Right? So the timing is like
Well,
you
the
go
thing
too long,
is-
it's like eminent domain.
Well, eminent domain, or you hold out too long and then you get old and die, and then your kids are the ones that sell it all
Right.
anyway, and they're the ones that make the
Yeah,
money.
you can't live on equity.
So,
You can't eat equity.
no.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyways, we'd love to hear what you have to say
Yeah.
on this. Like I said, this was just kind of a different discussion, just kind of like throwing out something that's a sensitive topic, but an important one, and one that's affecting us all.
Yeah, I think so. Anyways, tune in again. We'll be posting more, so keep up to date.
Yep.
Like, comment, subscribe, in any order of those. And hit the bell.
Okay.
Thanks again.